Good evening, everybody. Hope people coming in thick and fast. This is fantastic. We'll just give it a minute or two, because with this many people joining, I'm sure there'll be a few people coming in ever so slightly late, and there are people joining thick and fast. So we'll just give it a minute or two, and then we'll get cracking.
Wow, the numbers are going up.
Okay, there's a little break in people joining. I'm sure it won't last for long, but I'll take that opportunity to kick things off. A very warm welcome to this webinar, which we hope will help you discover your stand-up paddleboarding adventure in 2024. Thank you to everybody who has joined for giving us some of your time, and we hope that you get a lot from this session. This webinar is being laid on jointly by the RNLI and Canoe Wales, with contributions also from Her Majesty's Coast Guard. We've a lot to get through in the hour, and those of us that are in Wales or that way inclined know that there's a big football match going on that we probably want to go and watch the second half of straight afterwards. So we'll make sure that we stick to as much time, as good a time as we can. And we'll begin by introducing each of our presenters for the evening. And I'll go first. My name is Chris Cousins. I'm the RNLI's water safety lead for Wales West and the Isle of Man. It's a very special year for the RNLI this year, as it's our 200th birthday. And in that time, our charity has saved more than 146,000 lives. And our water safety team love helping people enjoy getting out on the water and unlocking their adventures. I'm certainly not a technical stand-up paddleboarding expert, but I'm here to support and promote water safety and the simple advice that we try and give to paddleboarders. Emily?
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Emily Evans, and I am working for Canoe Wales. Canoe Wales is the national governing body for stand-up paddleboarding within Wales, and at the moment we are helping to develop the governance around stand-up paddleboarding, implementing safety messaging and developing training standards around the sport. So yeah, thank you all very much for attending this evening, and yeah, I hope that you enjoy the webinar.
Richard?
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Richard Wasson. I'm the Community Safety Lead for HM Coast Guard, UK-wide. So I'll be contributing a bit later on, not to be a party pooper or to spoil anyone's fun, but with the priority of you all staying safe out on the water. So looking forward to the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. And Owain, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Owain Davis. I'm a crew member and helm at Penarth Lifeboat Station, and I was in command of a particular rescue that we're going to hear a little bit more about in a few minutes.
Great. Thanks, Owain. And Frankie, good evening.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name's Frankie. I live and work in South Wales, and I'm a special needs teacher, but I also spend a lot of time in and around the water, and I was rescued whilst out paddleboarding nearly 2 years ago.
Thanks, Frankie. And Nikki.
Evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I work for the RNLI as the Water Safety Coordinator, so I'm just here today to just answer any questions that might pop up on the chat.
Thanks, Nikki. Underplaying your role, you're making it tick along in the background, which is essential. Thank you so much. Great to see so many of you on the call, and at this point we'd love it if you fancy dropping into the chat box where you're dialing in from. It would be great to get an idea of the range of locations that people are dialing in from. Just a couple of points of housekeeping. Because of the high number of people on the call, you might have noticed that all microphones and video function is disabled. That's to try and protect bandwidth and to make the call run as smoothly as possible. But please do bear with us. We're definitely not used to presenting to this many people, so we're hoping that everything runs as smoothly as possible. The chat function, as I mentioned, will be open, and Nikki will be doing her best to keep up and respond to as many as we can. But with this many people on the call, we may not be able to get to every question during the hour, and rather than take questions or stop during the session, we'll have a 10 or 15-minute slot at the end to take a question and answer, and thanks to those who've sent in questions to us in advance. So we'll just move through the presentation and we'll have a chance for a bit of discussion at the end. This session will be recorded, and now's the chance to drop off the call if anyone's not comfortable with that. The slides and other information will be shared with you after the session, so we'll make sure that you have all the info you need, not to have to worry about scribbling anything down during the session. This session is aimed mainly at beginner, inexperienced or occasional stand-up paddleboarders. How can you have the best time on the water in the spring and summer of 2024? And we'll look at what to pack when paddling, what to consider when paddling when planning your trip, and where to get on the water. A little bit about understanding your equipment, how you call for help in an emergency, and how you unlock your stand-up paddleboarding adventure and further your stand-up paddleboarding knowledge. But before we get on to those topics, we're delighted to have Frankie and Owain here with us on the call tonight, and you've already met them briefly before. In a moment, Frankie and Owain will talk some more about Frankie's experience, but first, if the technology is with us, let's see a video telling Frankie's story. So at this point, I'm going to come out of the slides and allow you to see Frankie and Owain. And hand over to Owain to begin this section.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. And yeah, as Chris has just been describing, obviously, this is a rescue a couple of years ago. And so, Frankie, kind of before we come on to the rescue itself, what inspired you to take up paddleboarding in the first place?
I'd been swimming both in Penarth, but also in other areas of South Wales and in lakes, and doing kind of lots of different open water swimming for, I think by that point, kind of 2 or 3 years. And over the summer, lots of my friends had taken up paddleboarding. You know, there was a massive increase over the pandemic. And so I just kind of joined in with them, really. And there was a big group of us that used to go out in Penarth over the summer, kind of after work and at weekends and things. So it was just kind of a nice thing to do with friends, you know, more than anything.
And so by the time of the rescue, how long had you been paddleboarding by that point?
I think at that point it had been around kind of 18 months, a year, 18 months. So not kind of super experienced, but not you know, kind of brand new to it by kind of any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. And when you started, were you able to look anywhere for advice? Was there any information that you were able to get about, you know, what you should be doing, the sort of equipment you should have, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of in hindsight, you always look back at what you should do and what you should have done, don't you? But I think kind of, you know the basics about making sure you have your phone with you, which I didn't do, making sure that actually like you have you know, you're appropriately dressed and things like that. But you know, you kind of all look back in look back in hindsight, don't you, and think, oh, that's what I should have done. But there's loads of, you know, excellent resources that you can look for online about kind of safe paddleboarding and what you should be doing.
So on the day of the rescue back in May in 2022, how had you planned your day that day? What was your kind of your general approach?
So that stretch of water is water that I know really well. As I mentioned already, I'm a swimmer, and you know, I'm in and out of that water in Penarth most days. So I would say that I have an understanding of the tides and the currents of that particular stretch of water in Penarth, probably but better than most people, just because I'm in and out of it, you know, every day. So we had my friend SJ had texted me on, I think, you know, I can't even remember, I think it was a Thursday, just to say, oh, you know, do you fancy going paddleboarding this afternoon after work? At that point, because I was really enjoying my paddleboarding, my board was always in my car. And so, you know, we looked at the tide and thought, oh, you know, right, the tides look all right. The weather, like, it wasn't a really hot day, but it wasn't kind of chucking it down with rain or anything. And you can see in the clip that I've got a bobble hat on, and it's May, so it was, you know, it was quite cold. And as I mentioned in the clip, we were only going to go to the pier and then come straight back again. So actually, we should have been out on the water for a relatively kind of short period of time. But as you know, kind of everything didn't really go to plan.
So given that you only expected to be out on the water for, as you say, for a really brief period, what had you actually taken with you on board?
So I had taken nothing. I had myself, and that was it. So because I had gone with a friend, she had, I knew that she had a phone. I thought, and I can remember really clearly, like distinctly thinking this when as I left my phone in the car. I think I won't need my phone because my friend has got her phone, so we'll be fine. And you know, you think hindsight is a wonderful thing. But yeah, no, I can really clearly, distinctly remember thinking that, oh, I don't need mine because my friend's got hers. But as we know, thankfully she was able to get back to land safely and raise the alarm and ring the Coast Guard. But and the crew were with me. I think it was kind of within 40 minutes, or like from the whole from so it was super quick. But actually, I might have been rescued a little bit quicker if I had my own phone with me.
And so, at what point did you realize that things weren't going to plan? And what did you do at that point?
I realized quite quickly. So because and this is there was the rowing club were out having their practice session, so we'd had to go out a little bit further than we'd intended, and so as we got round the pier, we realized actually the wind was a lot stronger than we had initially realized, and actually the pier had been protecting us from a lot of that wind, and that's when we realized actually like there's an offshore wind here, and my friend was able to come back and paddle back in, but we realized that actually I was beginning to drift, and I was drifting very fast and going very far very quickly. And I think I realized quite soon that I needed to conserve my own energy, and actually trying to paddle against that wind was just, it was useless. It was absolutely, it was hopeless. There was no way I was going to be able to paddle against that. And actually, if I was going to stay on my board, I needed to stop and just to work out how to stay on my board and try and keep myself calm.
So I'm presumably, as you say, that's very different to the conditions that you were experiencing just when you launched. It was
absolutely. It was when we launched. It was really calm, really calm. But you don't realise actually that the pier, in this instance in Penarth, was providing us with so much protection from the wind. And then when we were away from that, the wind was very, it was very heavy wind.
Yeah, and as you say, Penarth as a marine environment, for those who don't know it, it's surrounded. There is a pier. It's surrounded by very steep cliffs as well. So there's a lot of protection at your initial launch location, and it doesn't take very far before things are quite different. So, given all of the experience and everything that you went through on that day, what advice would you give to everybody that's on the call?
I think firstly, take your phone with you, and make sure that it's somewhere accessible, because this is the problem that my friend SJ had, is that her phone was in a dry bag on the front of her board, and she at this point knew that I was in trouble and was so stressed and worried herself about trying to get her phone that she waited to get back to dry land to get her phone, because she didn't want to then get into trouble herself. So we've now both got the pouches to put your phone in, which makes them accessible. I think make sure that you're paddling within your limit. And there are lots of places in Penarth where actually we could have just got out and walked back, and it would have been fine. We might have annoyed a few rowers, but I think actually, given that, I think it would have been fine. Make sure that you've got some sort of flotation device with you. And also, and I've had this conversation a lot with people from the RNLI, if you're in you think you're in any danger, call them. They'd much rather come out and perhaps think, oh, actually we weren't needed, but you might save someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely, and exactly as you say, we've never got any problem at all in going out. We'd much rather be called and then discover that it's not necessarily an emergency than be called at a later point. So yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's great to hear all of the positive lessons that you've learned, and I'm sure everybody in the call is really grateful as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you for coming and rescuing me as well.
You're more than welcome.
Owain, do you mind if I just jump in and ask you a couple of questions from your perspective as a helm of the lifeboat in Penarth? Just a couple of quick ones. How did you feel when you reached Frankie and realised that even though she'd had a difficult ordeal, she was going to be okay?
Yeah, it was you know, quite quite emotional and moving for everybody on board whenever you you know, do rescue somebody, and when there's a successful outcome like that, and especially because when we launched the lifeboats and were directed to the original position that we'd been given by Frankie's friend, there was no sign of Frankie. You know, we were in a scenario where we didn't quite know exactly what was had happened, whether Frankie was separated from the board, whether she'd made it inshore somewhere else. And it was Ben, one of our crew member, who spotted Frankie. He's got incredible eyesight, and because by this point Frankie was a very, very long way away and was very, you know, barely visible. So we'd just gone into our first kind of, you know, search evolution, and just to get that initial confirmation that we'd been able to spot her and were able to positively identify her was, yeah, it was a very, very good feeling indeed.
Thank you. And just one last one before we go back to some more slides. What challenges do paddleboard rescues pose for lifeboat teams like the one that you lead?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that the single biggest challenge, you know, generally is that paddleboards aren't very, very big. And that if you're an individual who's sitting on top of a paddleboard, then you don't need to be that far away before, again, visibility can be an issue. We were lucky on the day in question. You know, it was towards the end of the day, but we still had, you know, decent light. And there was a little bit of chop, but not too much. So that did help us in terms of our visibility. So we were able to spot Frankie, you know, reasonably quickly. Obviously, paddleboards do move with the wind quite a lot, and the combination of the wind and the tide. You know, Frankie was the best part of a mile away from where we expected her to be based on the information that we'd been given. And that's, again, quite a long way away. So paddleboards can move at pace. And I suppose the final thing is that, obviously, paddleboards aren't necessarily being used by people that are used to being out on the water, and certainly not used to being out on the open water. And so people won't necessarily have all of the kit and all the equipment that they should have. So I think that those are the biggest challenges that we face, really.
Thank you. Really, really useful. And thank you both for that section, especially Frankie for sharing your story. Lots of lovely comments coming in on the chat, and I echo every one of them. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. I'm going to reshare my screen if I can do that seamlessly.
Do I need to do that, Chris?
I think I'm there.
Okay.
No, I'm not. Getting there though.
Okay. So we're just going to play a short film on what to pack for paddleboarding. If you need to stand up paddleboarding, then grab a pen and paper because all of this is really useful information. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Ooh. Awesome. So sorry about the slight technical glitch there, but we are going to cover all of the information on that video again anyway. So we're going to just kind of go through some of those points in a little bit more detail now. So yeah, so if you didn't manage to see the video, it just said that always wear a leash and the correct one for your environment that you're going to be paddling in. If you're using an inflatable board, then pump it to the right pressure, because that's going to give you a better paddling experience. Always wear a buoyancy aid and take a means of calling for help, a phone in a waterproof pouch. Check the weather and wear suitable clothing. So especially at this time of year, we may have some great weather coming up over the Easter break, and if you want to head out, that's fantastic. But the weather can change very quickly at this time of year, and the water is still very cold. And of course, go with some friends, a group, and tell people where you're going. And of course, you know, if you're paddling with other people, they can call for help if it's needed. So I'm just going to pass over to Chris.
Thanks. We talk a lot about offshore winds, but what are they and how will they affect you when you're paddleboarding? So an offshore wind is when the wind is blowing from the land or shore out towards the sea. So in the map of Penarth shown on the slide, here's Penarth in South Wales, where Frankie and Owain were talking about earlier. If the wind was westerly, so blowing in the direction of the yellow arrow, it would be blowing, and it would be an offshore wind if you launched your stand-up paddleboard close to the lifeboat station that you can see there with the red marker. If the wind was from the east, it would be an onshore wind at Penarth. If you paddle on an offshore wind day, you may quickly be blown away from the land into deeper water or out to sea. Research by British Canoeing, now Paddle UK, last year found that in a force 4 wind, which is about 18-20 miles an hour, a paddler could drift approximately 1 mile in just half an hour. Paddling back to shore against the wind can be really challenging, and many of the incidents our RNLI lifeboats and lifeguards respond to involving stand-up paddleboards are to people unable to make it back to shore unaided because of an offshore wind. Cross-shore winds, which blow along the coast, may not blow you out to sea, but may make it difficult to get back to where you entered the water, where you want to get to. Planning your trip is crucial, and you should always know whether the wind is blowing offshore before you go paddling. A good way of doing this is visiting an RNLI lifeguarded beach, where you'll see an orange windsock flying if there's an offshore wind blowing. There are also a range of websites and apps where you can get really accurate forecasts of wind speed and direction, as well as other things to help you plan a fun trip, like air and water temperature, tide times, and weather forecasts. Our advice is to avoid paddling on offshore wind days. There's always another spot with a different orientation or another day for your paddle.
Right, so when you head out paddling, make sure that you always wear a buoyancy aid. So a buoyancy aid will help keep you afloat if you find yourself in the water and in trouble, and they can also add some warmth, keep the warmth in. So the waters around our coasts and inland are cold, and if you fall in, you might experience cold water shock. So even if you're a confident swimmer, this sudden exposure to cold water may make you panic, and wearing flotation, such as a buoyancy aid, could save your life. So a buoyancy aid is a type of personal flotation device. You might have heard the term PFD, or personal flotation device, and this is an umbrella term for different types of flotation. So a buoyancy aid, like we can see here in the picture, is a fixed flotation, and they're designed for doing water sports and for swimmers. So where you might be in and out of the water, and they often go on like a jacket with a zip up the front or over the head with straps to tighten them up. So they provide about 50 newtons of buoyancy, and there are lots of different types of buoyancy aids on the market, but it's important that you find one that's comfortable and fits well. And with buoyancy aids, you need to know your weight and chest size to make sure it's the correct size and fit, and so it doesn't come off when you enter the water. So go to a store if possible, and so that a professional can help you find the right size. So if you're a non-swimmer, certainly shouldn't stop you from going out on the water, but look for a personal flotation device that offers 100 newtons of buoyancy. And it's important to note that buoyancy aids are not designed to turn an unconscious casualty onto their back. Other types of personal flotation you might see, especially for stand-up paddleboarders, quite popular, are waist PFDs, and they look a bit like bum bags, but this doesn't automatically offer you flotation. When you fall in the water, you must activate it, and before you can wear it or hold on to it. So if you're a new paddler, that's a bit more of a last resort, and if you're just starting out, best choice is a buoyancy aid. Again, you might hear about life jackets. These are not designed for sports, and they're often water activated when you fall in the water, but they can be bulky if they're as well. So again, your best choice is a buoyancy aid. So you also need to wear the correct leash when heading out on your stand-up paddleboard. Make sure you have a leash, and it's important to check your leash for damage too. They can easily become brittle over time, sun-faded, rusty, or cracked. So check for tears in your leash before you go out paddleboarding, and do that regularly. If you're hiring kit from anywhere, if you're going holidaying over the summer, just also check the leash before you head out. So most SUPs do come with a leash, however, it might not be appropriate for the environment that you're paddling in. If you're paddling in surf conditions, you want to use a straight leash. So this will stop the board from recoiling back to you. And for all other paddling, a coiled leash reduces the chance of it dragging in the water and catching on things. So then you want to consider where you're going to attach your leash to. So is it going to be your calf, or is it going to be your ankle, or is it going to be a quick release leash? So if you're paddling on lakes, canals, sea, and coastal bays, nice sheltered water where there's no risk of the leash catching on anything and causing an entrapment, you can attach that to your ankle or your calf. And if there's any flowing or moving water where there could be a risk of hazards that might cause entrapment, such as mooring buoys in an estuary, a jetty, a pier, then it's advised to use a quick release waist belt system, which you can see on the right-hand side of the picture. So also planning your journey so that you know where exactly you're going to paddle, what kind of water it is, will help you to pick the right kit for your trip. So the advice is for those starting out on their paddling journey. If you're moving into more advanced supping in whitewater, then you should seek some lessons, and there's more technical advice around kit for whitewater and rivers. And for more safety information, you can actually scan that QR code on the blue leaflet that you see on the page, and that takes you to the Go Paddling website, where there's the latest information on safety information. So I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Thank you. For the last few years, the RNLI's main national water safety campaign has been Float to Live. Hopefully many of you have seen this advice on social media, TV ads, or out and about, and hopefully many of you have tried practicing it in swimming pools or open water. We know that around 40% of accidental water-related fatalities in the UK involve incidents where people never expected to enter the water at all. Many of these incidents involve cold water shock, the body's natural physiological reaction to being exposed to cold water, which causes the heart rate and breathing rate to rise and can lead to a sense of panic or needing to thrash around or swim hard. Not a good combination when you're in difficulty in water. Sadly, many of the most serious incidents that our lifeboat volunteers like Owain and our lifeguards are called to are when casualties take on water in the first minute or two of being in cold water while suffering cold water shock. If you get into trouble in the water while stand-up paddleboarding, or indeed in any situation, our advice is to float to live. That means tilt your head back with your ears submerged and try to relax and control your breathing. Use your hands to help you stay afloat if you need to. It's all about buying time and being calm with your airway clear while the effects of cold water shock pass, which is normally around a minute or two. Then you can call for help, swim to safety, or take another relevant next step to safety. And at that point, I'll hand over to Richard from the Coast Guard. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. And well, I have to say I'm really impressed so far, and thanks to Frankie especially for sharing her story. I mean, learning comes from stories, and that was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, as I said at the top of the call, I am Richard from the Coast Guard. I'll be with you just for a couple of minutes, don't worry, not too long, and just to talk a bit about and just really solidify what we've already heard. So the Coast Guard, we initiate and coordinate maritime search and rescue in the UK. So what does that really mean? Well, we heard it in action. Really what we do in Frankie's story is Frankie's friend called us, and then we paged the lifeboat, and the lifeboat went to get Frankie. So in a very basic way, what we do is we will task the appropriate asset to come and help you if you are in danger or if you require assistance. So in terms of this, I have three really key bits for you to hear. I'm not here to tell you to do anything, but I'm here hopefully to provide some information that can help you to make decisions that'll help you to stay safe out in the water. So the first one we've heard from already is to carry a phone in a waterproof pouch, particularly if you're staying close to the shore. That's probably the primary way of calling us, and to call 999 and to ask for the Coast Guard if you're along the coast. We've heard it mentioned before to call early to avoid that doubt and to avoid us having any delay coming to help you. And now that really goes for not just calling for yourself, but also calling for someone else. So you could be walking along a seafront somewhere and you might see a paddleboarder that's in difficulty. And that's a case when you don't want to hesitate as well. Dial 999 and ask for the Coast Guard. And as Owain mentioned it before, we have no problem taking calls. We have no problem tasking, and there actually isn't anyone in an emergency. So loads of people call us, and sometimes the people are fine and they're full of apologies. They're like, oh, we're so sorry for calling. And we always say, please do not worry about calling us. We would far rather get that call if you're in doubt than us being too late to a certain situation. So if you want to just shoot it on, Emily, is that okay? We've got another slide. So I've got it there, call 99, ask for the Coast Guard. I've just really got this slide really to demonstrate our very close working relationship with the RNLI. We have various assets all over the UK. You can see there the Coast Guard helicopter, obviously the RNLI. We have our own, shout out to our own volunteers as well, our Coast Guard rescue teams. We have about 300 of them around the UK. So we'll task whatever asset is appropriate. Whenever you call our operations room, the very first thing, and I want you to bear this in mind, the very first thing that we will ask you is where you are. So very often, sometimes, and I've done this before myself, so it's, you know, it's easy to do when you're away from home, when you're away from holiday or on holiday or whatever it may be. And I've been on a beach in a very remote area of Ireland, and I've actually thought to myself, if I was to call for help now, where would I say that I am? And I actually wasn't too sure. I had to really think about it, and I had to look up and see where I was. So it's really to think, what if you're going out, you're about to hit the water, just have a think to yourself, what if I need to call the Coast Guard today? What am I going to tell them? Where am I going to tell them that I am? So that's really the key piece of information that we need. Sounds obvious. There are ways and means that we use to do that. There's 3 words. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but by far, if you're close to shore and you have telephone reception, by far the easiest way for us is to really just hear from you by voice, and you can tell us, I'm on the east side of such and such a beach or whatever, and we'll come and get you. So that's really, really important. The other piece that's really important is how many people require assistance. So just another couple of quick things. There is other ways to communicate, a VHF, DSC. I'm not going to go into these in any detail. These are more advanced in a way, but also really, really useful pieces of kit to have. VHF or a PLB, and there's also a PLB is a personal locator beacon, and there's also a Safe Tracks app. Now this is more for keeping in touch with your family. You can put information into that and they can keep track of where you are, and if they've any problems with you, they can raise the alarm with us. So like everything in life, communication is the absolute key. It was mentioned about the phone pouch and keeping in touch and telling family. If your plans change, tell your family. We get calls all the time from panicked people, family, friends, expecting somebody home, and they've actually stayed on the water for a while longer because the weather's been nice. And for us, that's a full-scale search. If we can't get in touch with you, if your phone's off or for whatever reason, for us, we'll take that you're in difficulties and we'll come looking for you. You might have a helicopter hovering above you saying if you're okay. So communication is the absolute key. So linked to that, my final point that I'm going to make, and this is really a request, is to mark your water sports equipment. So for example, your stand-up paddleboard, mark it simply with a name, even just a first name and a telephone number, or 2 telephone numbers, even better. And the reason for that is all the time we find paddle boards that are drifting offshore with nobody on them. And if we find a paddle board that's drifted off the beach by accident or whatever it is, and somebody tells us about that, we are into a full-scale search and rescue situation, when in actual fact, it may have just drifted away by accident. And if we go out to that board and there's a name and phone number on it, we can confirm straight away if anybody's in danger or not. It's also an idea to put a in case of emergency number on it in case you are actually having an emergency and we find that board and we can contact somebody else as well. So that actually goes for all water sports equipment. You wouldn't believe how many times we're out searching for people when actually they're fine and their water sports equipment has drifted away from them. So it's always a good idea to report that as well. So my last and final point, that's really everything from me. It's fantastic. We've got 226 people on the call right now. I can see it's amazing. Now, I would appeal to you all to go and share this with some of your friends and family. It's great you're here, but please, please, please share it. Once you get the recording, get it out to as many people as possible. This information that Frankie has shared and everybody shared is absolutely valuable. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Richard. You're on mute there, mate.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Richard, as well. So just a very quick roundup from that. do make sure that you plan your trip. Make sure you know your location, you know where you are. Go with others. Wear the correct clothing, and check your equipment. Pack the right equipment, and pack and like Richard said, mark up your paddleboard, kayak, whatever. I understand it's probably not just stand-up paddlers on the call today. So whatever craft you're taking on the water. Brilliant. So there are a few tools that you can use to find the right spot. This is just one of them. This is the Go Paddling website. The address is just on the top there. This is a really handy tool. And this gives you safe get in and get out points for inland paddling. It also shows local clubs, shops, kit stores, and danger areas such as weirs on rivers. And there's links to safety advice and other paddling information from this site. So when you're choosing the right spot to go paddling, just have a little look for some tools to help you do so. So if you're going from on the coast, on the sea, then look for a life-guarded beach, although do still take care to plan your trip and check the weather and all the other things that we've spoken about already this evening. So if you are going to paddle inland, you do need a waterways license. You can't always get on every piece of inland water, so do make sure that you're able to paddle on it before you do so. But there are over 4,500 kilometres of paddleable waterways. And of course, you don't need a waterways license to get on the sea, but paddling inland is a really great way to hone your skills before going out in more challenging conditions. And it's equally as beautiful and fulfilling. So one of the ways that you can get a license, and having a license is for the maintenance of those inland waterways, for example, flood damage repairs and removal of debris from rivers and so on. And one of the ways you can pick up a license is by having a Home Nation membership, so a Canoe Wales membership, a Paddle UK, Canoe, Paddle Scotland. And they are about £45 a year, but there's lots of discounts available for families and so on. And that license, that membership will give you the waterways license, access to membership benefits, discounts for stores, public liability insurance, which is very important in case you were to cause harm to another water user or property and so on. So and so you get safety information through members' newsletters, and you know, some of that is like product recalls as well, and information about paddling events. And there's loads of stuff that goes on with those organisations. So there's the link to the Canoe Wales one, but of course you could use a search engine just to have a look for all the other paddling organisation memberships too. So a little fun section from me, like if you are, we've talked a lot about what you need to get on the water and all the things that you need to do to stay safe on the water, but how can you like progress your paddling journey, and what else can you do with your stand-up paddleboard? So some things that you might like to try in the future: whitewater stand-up paddleboarding. You might want to try some team events and races, maybe even stand-up paddleboard surfing, yoga, polo. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to go back a slide. And there are so many advances in adaptive SUP as well. There's opportunities for everybody to get on the water. So you can also try expedition and coastal paddling. You can go on stand-up paddleboard safety courses. You could become an instructor or a coach, take part in river cleans, and there's plenty of youth paddling. And of course, there's other events like Sup Bike Run, UK international events, and I know that like dogs like to get on boards as well. So plenty of opportunity for everybody to go paddling. So there's also a chance to get into stand-up paddleboard racing. People take part of racing at all levels. There's everything from like grassroots events to international competition, and the opportunity to compete for your home nation at international events. So something like this might not be on your radar, But it's super fun, and hopefully this just inspires you to get out on your board more. And let's move on to some of the ways you can unlock that adventure. So if you want to go down some free paddling pathways, you might want to look for a Facebook group and some peer paddles, but make sure you are paddling within your ability within these groups. There is an event called Aqua Paddle. This is a free timed 5K event, and they're all around the UK. They're multi-craft, not just SUP, and they're great ways to meet paddlers and paddle in safe locations and challenge yourself. And of course, using the paddle points system that we went through just now, you can find yourself a safe get in, get out location, or paddle at a lifeguarded beach. If you were looking to pay for some tuition or hire kit, you might want to look for a local SUP school or club, go hire a board or have some individual or group lessons. And these are great options because they help you to gather more knowledge about stand-up paddleboarding, learn about decision making, learn from others, and meet people to paddle with. And you're going to get guidance from more experienced instructors and coaches. So safety is paramount, and when you're looking for a place to paddle, just make sure that the place you paddle has public liability insurance and business insurance, and make sure that the people you're going with are appropriately qualified for what they're going to deliver, that they have a regulated qualification and understand how to deliver your paddling session for the environment that you want to learn in and that is appropriate for your skill level. So that is all from me, and I really hope that you found some of this information useful, and I'm just going to pass back to Chris.
Thank you very much. Just a quick roundup now, but before I do, just to give everyone the update that it's currently 0-0 between Wales and Poland, in case anyone was interested in that. A recap of the key takeaways in terms of some of the safety messaging from this session. Please do think about planning your paddle. Take with you a buoyancy aid, a phone in a waterproof pouch, or another means of calling for help, and know to dial 999 if you feel like you're in difficulty. Have the correct leash, equipment and clothing. Try and go with others, and plan the weather, and know that if there is an offshore wind where you're planning your paddle, it might be better to look elsewhere or try on a different day, and also know what to do in an emergency. So remember what Richard said about that 999 call early, and also remember that float to live technique if you get into difficulty yourself in the water. And then some really great information from Em at the end there about ways that you can explore to improve your knowledge and continue on your paddling journey. And just to echo Richard's point, I'm sure for many people on this call, this has been quite low level. I'm sure there's people with lots of experience who have who probably have forgotten more than about what we've spoken about. But please do share it with others, because we, as the RNLI, Canoe Wales and the Coast Guard, probably don't reach the people that we need to, and we really need your help in doing that. So thank you for your time. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we've got a few minutes at the end for any questions. So just stop sharing my slides. Hopefully now you can see us. So Nikki, I don't know if there's any questions that have come in on the chat during the session about any section of the presentation tonight that you might pick out for us.
Yeah, we've got a few questions there, so I will try and share them with you. Julie has put one in the Q&A, which is, why does the float to live advice include having your ears submerged? Does that activate the dive reflex and slow breathing? So Chris, sorry, I'm going to share that one with you about the float.
Yeah, no, it's got nothing to do with the dive reflex. It's we've done quite a lot of additional research each year that the Float to Live campaign has been our main message as the RNLI, in making sure that we help people to float as easily as possible. And the research that we carried out last winter, the winter before last, 22-23, found that if you have your ears submerged back in the water, it puts your body in a far better position to float easily. And we found that using that technique, even people who weren't confident swimmers, somewhere in the region of 80 to 90% felt they could float confidently using that. And that was up on previous tests we'd done where we didn't include that specific advice about putting your ears back in the water. So it's just simply a floating technique on your back to give most people the best chance. It's got nothing to do with the dive reflex. But thank you, good question. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Another one from Roz was, what are the tracking apps?
Was that one for you, Richard? Maybe on Safe Tracks, was it?
Could be, yeah, if that's Safe Tracks, yeah. So Safe Tracks is hosted by the RYA, the Royal Yachting Association. And the way that works is you can put your details into it, your next of kin details, share it with them. And if you have a phone signal, they can actually track where you are if you activate it on your trip, which is really useful. And then if they have concern for you, they will contact us, the Coast Guard, and we have access to it as well. We can see it if they alert us to your situation. Then obviously we can come and assist if necessary. It's very important to keep it updated. We sometimes see people heading up the M5 with their Safe Tracks still running. It's just, they've packed their sup away in the car or whatever, and their Safe Tracks is still operational. So like I said, communication, keeping on top of your communication is everything, really. It's a great piece of equipment, but it does need to be kept up to date as well. So yeah, thanks.
Got time for one quick one as well?
Yeah,
Thanks.
go on.
It's just really good because it was about the wind direction. So it was from Joanna. On a lifeguarded beach with a windsock, how do I know what the wind direction is when I get out of the sheltered bay? And she also said, thank you, Frankie, for sharing your story. Really brought the dangers home.
You want to take that one, Em, or should I? You're on mute there. I'll take it. I'll do that. So I think the first part's simple. Lifeguards will only fly the windsock if the wind is blowing offshore. So unlike the flags on the beaches that the lifeguards will use in all wind conditions, windsocks will only be flown when the wind is blowing offshore as far as the lifeguards can deem it. Knowing the wind direction outside of a bay is slightly more complicated, particularly if the bay is orientated in a certain way. I think the best thing to, I mean, if you're supping at a lifeguarded beach, then ask the lifeguards on the day as well. They'll be able to give you all the information you need. It's kind of difficult to say. Each different location might be slightly different, but if you're supping at a lifeguarded beach and the windsock's flying, probably avoid going in to start with, but do ask the lifeguards that are there. They'll be able to give you all the information that you need about how the wind would affect that given location. I think it's past. It's an hour of everybody's time that we don't want to make into an hour and 1 minute, so we will call it there. I can appreciate this has probably been a different experience not being able to have your cameras on and do the things you would normally do, but it's also a different experience for us because there's been 220 or 30 people on here. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your time, and particularly to all the participants for contributing as well, Richard, Owain, Frankie, Em and Nikki. And we will be in touch with all of you who signed up via Eventbrite shortly to share the slides and other information. So and we'll try and pick up on as many of the questions we haven't got around to as well. So thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of the evening, and hopefully Wales will score a goal shortly. Thank you.